Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us at the MarTech Memo today. I'm joined by, Robbie Taylor, who leads revenue at JDA TSG, and which is a managed operations partner behind programs like TurboTax Live and the largest Microsoft engineering teams, to talk about outbound RevOps and the future of human-in-the-loop selling, which we were just talking about.
Let's do it. I'm excited for it.
All right, fantastic. So Robbie, just before we started recording, we were just talking a little bit about your team and sort of the objectives that you've been tasked with. Talk to me a little bit about sort of the challenges in leading carrying a big number and having a limited team to do it, and understanding that it's not just about headcount, it's more about operational efficiency.
I think it's a great question, and one that doesn't come from organizational pressure. I'd say this is actually coming from personal pressure for me running the Rev org, right? Our business is happy and willing to invest in additional revenue headcount if I deem it appropriate. I think where I see, and I think that most of the people listening to this podcast would probably resonate with, is it's not just going to be about how many heads you have is divided by the total revenue you're going to get to. Now, the name of the game is efficiency. Now, I would be remiss of saying we don't need lots of humans, because our business is based on human services. So we definitely want lots of humans to be doing things. Don't get me wrong, but it's about what they're doing and the technology they're partnered with, right? So when our CEO says to me, hey, do you want another head? I do want the budget for that head. It might not just look like the traditional, I want another account exec, or I want another BDR. It could look like I want to invest deeper in the tech stack, or, hey, I actually want to pass some of this funding to marketing because I actually want more organic leads driving through the door because my team has become much more efficient and they can handle more sales volume at a time. So that question's become a lot more complicated as technology continues to evolve. It doesn't mean I don't want more headcount. It just means I want my headcount doing a lot of different things than they used to.
No, and it's absolutely a challenge that every go-to-market leader right now is facing, right? Is like, it's not about just throwing more heads at it. It's like, how does my team operate, and drive more revenue and be more effective at what they're doing, and making sure that my whole infrastructure is set up to drive more opportunities for them, as opposed to them just going through the traditional outbound reach out that they typically do. And, one of the things that was really interesting when we talked last time is the bifurcation of the talent when you were looking to hire. And I don't know if you ended up bringing on those two folks that we talked about, but talk to me about that, because I thought that was really interesting in terms of from a skill set standpoint, right? Like when you are thinking about bringing people on, there's different skill sets that you want them to embody, but yet you don't want too much of one and too much of the other. And then I'll share on the backside of that answer a little bit about a conversation I had at a go-to-market dinner I was at 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so I would say I've been building and running sales teams for the last decade, right? And obviously, just like any industry, these things change over time, how you look at it. But for the last, I would call it 8.5 years prior to the last 1.5 years, I've looked at it as the skill sets being, is someone going to be able to solve different stages of the funnel? So I need top of funnel resourcing, your traditional BDRs, SDRs, things of that nature, driving things through the door. You need your folks that can drive pipeline acceleration. So who's actually able to capture those leads, take them, push them through discovery, identify real opportunities. And then you need closers, right? And obviously there's a lot of nuances to this, enterprise and mid-market and verticals and like all these other things. But like at a high level,
right, that's
how I've traditionally thought about it for 85% of my time in pure sales leadership, right? The last 1.5 years with the changes in technology has dramatically changed, right? And so I've recently been looking at building out a couple additional sellers and looking at building out a core foundation for our team as we continue to mature our go-to-market motion, think about how we make it more efficient with technology, et cetera. And I really went into it with saying, I want someone with deep sales expertise. So don't get me wrong, I still want the sales expertise, but that understands the technology market. They understand where agentic workflows are going. They understand how to build hyper-efficient sales machines. I still need them talking to customers. I still need them able to close deals. But now I don't need them to have a BDR in front of them. I might not need them to have a qualifier in front of them. They can build all of that with technology and then still be that final salesperson and closer. And then on the other side, I wanted the high EQ, relationship-oriented individual, more of your traditional mid-market or enterprise account executive that has experience in big tech, understands the verticals we're going after, and understands kind of traditional sales motions. Not to say the first profile didn't, but those two things, and both are on board and working as designed, right? And I didn't even tell them I'm hiring you for this or that. Their JDs are the same,
right?
But they're gravitating naturally towards different things, and they're both helping each other very much with the core competencies and skill sets that they have, right? And so that to me is the future of hiring, is complementing role types versus like RAEs all look like X. I just don't see that being like that anymore.
Yeah, and so to build off of that, the conversation that I was having was that, and I use this as an example, is not so much that it's going to be bifurcated like that, but the sellers of tomorrow, of today, really need to embody both of those skill sets, right? You can't, no longer can you be one or the other. You need to be able to do both and be able to have that high EQ and be able to sell at an enterprise level while at the same time understand the technology and build it if you need. And I think we're at that moment from a revenue perspective now, that those sellers that don't pick up technology and don't invest their time and energy and understanding of it are going to get left behind, right? There will still always be that need, but there's going to be fewer and fewer capable of that to be able to do just the high EQ at the enterprise level without having the technology background. But I think it's table stakes these days.
I was having a conversation this morning. I spend a lot of time speaking with revenue leaders because I need to stay up to date with the latest and greatest, right? And the best way I can do that, you can read blogs and you can do all these kind of things, listening to podcasts, plug here from the MarTech podcast. But
there you go.
I find that conversations with people in the trenches right now is my best way of learning, right? And I was just speaking with one of them, and he walked me through their GitHub Claude Code instance and goes, we are removing CRM. Like, it's plugged in now to our granola, into all of our call recordings. My to-do list is automated based on every conversation that I'm having. My CRM is now just updating based on what's happening. The interface now for my CRM is just basically, I could just have that in my instance of GitHub or Claude Code, because it's just Claude Code is telling it. So like, as long as I can design it in a way, and they put Z over the top of it and have another like fancy ways of making it more consumable. But I was like, wow, this is getting to the next level. This is the leader of the business, not one of the sellers. That's like, the only way people will interact, I will work with my team now, is like literally sending them code interfaces, and they better be able to figure it out. And like, that's crazy. Like, no one in sales used to be dealing with code interfaces. And I'm just looking at what he's showing me on the screen. I'm like, wow, I felt like I'm up to date, and I felt like a dinosaur looking at this. Right now, I'm like, I got to accelerate quickly. So now I'm spending my day looking at Claude and Zed and figuring out how I'm going to like build this and be like, I don't even want a CRM anymore.
Well, but that begs the question. So I don't know if you listen to SaaStr podcast at all, and they talk about 90-10, like buy versus build, right? Like it's your responsibility is to drive revenue, right? And at the end of the day, it's like, how much of your time and energy do you need to put in to build that, which is a lot. Certainly you can oversee it, versus buying something that exists that accomplishes what you need, which is constantly changing, right? So you got to have something that's adaptable. But one of the things, so it's not just about outbound anymore. It's like, think about it also from an inbound and from marketing, right? So how do you balance that also and tie in marketing, RevOps, product into that fold and nurture, right, those inbound opportunities and make sure that you're picking up those signals to help your sales team, as opposed to the traditional, we'll wait until we get the report from marketing. Marketing says, hey, here are people that are reading our content and that are interested, but they were, they raised their hand like 2 weeks ago, so how are you balancing that? You talked about, whether or not you'd consider, deploying resources towards marketing, but at the same time, marketing's got to be aligned and on board with what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I do think that the integration between the sales, the marketing, and like the RevOps and marketing ops functions needs to be so much more intentional than it used to be. The dependencies were so clear historically, because like the sales team didn't really know what marketing operations did. And so like they need to lean on them when they're asking questions about it. Now, like the technology can do it for you. So like in theory, you're kind of like, but you need the expertise on the marketing ops side of the house. You need the tech. Like, I'm not saying that you don't need the people, but like technology's automating a lot of the things on the back end, so you could almost feel like you can get away with not needing that integration, but it actually becomes infinitely more important. I'll give you an example. We're running a workflow where we use trained agents within Perplexity that then are doing market analysis that understands who our ICP is, what our service offerings are, and what triggers would say, hey, there's a good opportunity to speak with someone in the market. That then pushes into a GPT instance, which builds copy for email, pushes into Gamma to create a one-pager, and then creates a script for us to record a Loom video. That flow alone used to take a long time with a lot of coordination. So that is like, in a minute, based on someone just had a board meeting and posted about it on LinkedIn. We already have their email ready. We have a video about to be recorded. And we have a one-pager form, right? Like how fast that occurred. But the point I'm getting to with circling back to the marketing side, if they're not using that exact trained agent in Perplexity, their messaging is going to be totally different. And that one pager is not going to be on. And when I say, hey, get nurture campaigns for these people because I know they're interested, I just think it's not the right time, they might be sending them a totally different message unless we're using the same agent. Like it's basically like you're talking to two different people if you're not using the same trained agents in the same instance. And so getting your tech stack figured out, understanding how it's being trained, because if you just go throw one subject matter expert to train the Perplexity agent in whatever way they want to, like that's a huge risk. That's basically your entire branding now is based on one dude's positioning on how he trained an agent, right? So that integration
There's
becomes
inherent
so
bias in that, right? No, absolutely, and it's it's really what should be driving. It's always been my frustration is the silos between marketing, revenue, rev ops, marketing ops, and even product, right? Like, how do you make sure you're capturing the right data and all working in unison as opposed to waiting on one or another? Because your messaging has to be consistent, right? And that's always been that frustration. You're waiting on marketing to do this or to get you the new deck or to get you the new messaging that they've been working on. When in fact, now it's all kind of happening in real time. So you've got to make sure that that's all aligned at a layer. So that's,
I've got a contrarian point for that, which is, and I think that a lot of people might not like to hear this because of that. I believe you need to spend more time in meetings than you used to. Why? Because the actual day-to-day doing of stuff is easier, but you need to get aligned on how to do it and how to be aligned on it. So more time strategically thinking and discussing and less time executing, because the executing can be done more efficiently once you've done the meeting part really well. So to me, I'm over-indexing on strategic discussions because I know that the tactical stuff can get done really fast.
Yeah, no, that's you're 100% right. It's making sure everybody's aligned and coordinated as opposed to doing their own thing. And I think that's also a lot of organizations struggle right now in the age of AI, that they're expecting their AEs or their sales team to go out and build their own products and tools, right? Or their own SDRs and make sure that they're using AI because they need to be AI forward. But at the end of the day, if it's not structured in the right way, it's going to be a lot of slop and it's just not going to be a lot of coordination. And I think that it's got to come at a strategic level organizationally. And you've got to have that right thinking at the top, or else if you just give people tools, they're not going to know how or what, or invest the time in it. And if they do, they may not be doing it properly, right? So messages can be jumbled. There could be inherent bias involved. There could be conflicting, outbound and or inbound messaging that is existing, and it can get messy fast.
It's quite dangerous for the loudest voice in the room can have like a crazily bigger impact than they used to, right? And the loudest voice in the room isn't always the best voice in the room. Actually, I think oftentimes people would think the quietest person in the room probably has the best ideas. They're just not saying them that much.
Right.
Which, as an extroverted sales guy, I'm like, no, that's not true. The guy that speaks all the time is definitely the one with the best ideas.
Definitely the right one. Yeah.
But I've seen this live. Who's my best AI person? What are their bright ideas? And I'm like, you know what? Just go run with it, right? And that can be smart for a period to test those things out. But if you're scaling in that manner, one person is basically everything for your organization, how things are being perceived, and it's very risky. There's the adage of the government takes a long time to regulate because tech moves faster, and so they can't quite keep up. And every time they come up, AI, it's like tech companies can't even figure out how to structure or themselves because the technology is moving faster than tech companies like know how to do with it, right? Like right now the tech companies are the laggard even because it's like the technology is moving so quickly, and like the amount of people, like every organization I've touched or advised or I'm actively running sales for right now, since AI is continuing to innovate so much, there's a lot of just shadow AI processes going on. Everyone's using their own little instances over here. They've got their own little theories and things that they run and make themselves more. There's very little standardization. There's very little guardrails. Like it can become very concerning very quickly. I think we've done a good job of recognizing that, tightening things up, being very secure with our data and how we handle that. So I don't think there's like a security risk for us. But I still think no matter how much I'm trying to focus on this, I've got 6 different sellers all working slightly different ways within a tech stack that we've deployed, right? And like that's just the world right now.
Yeah, and it's also and let's say you do, find your one AI guy, right? What happens if they leave, right?
I'm like super dependent on an AI guy right now that I'm like, dude, we got to make sure that the AI guy is happy.
Right. Well, there's that, but then also it then becomes, it's then as the AI guys like, well, you're hired, he's got a number, I'm sure, or she, right? They've got to drive revenue. So now you're adding more to them, right? That's not their day job. So now you're asking them to do something else. And I'm sure they're like, well, wait a minute, I'm not getting paid more. I'm just being, now I'm expected to work outside my selling hours to build something that's usable for the organization, but yet my number's not going down. It's only going up. I'm still expecting, so, it creates that, that friction in the organization, over what you want your people to be doing and what they need to be doing. And I think that that's always a challenge. And then it also brings up another really interesting thing that I find to be the biggest challenge. And you talked about, CRM integration and so forth, and that's CRM fidelity, right? So like in a world where AI updates fields, what does good enough and from a CRM fidelity look like? And where do you still need that human judgment?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is really interesting. I kind of started talking about this a little bit earlier around one of the revenue leaders I'm talking to is like, I don't know if we're going to need CRM anymore, right? Like it's, and so like, I kind of push back on that quite a bit because I'm like, this breaks every core thing I've ever thought of in my life. But I think that the CRM tool is really a system of record, right? And so when you think about what we use,
should be the source of truth.
It's to be the source of truth. And so that's where I'm getting to, right? Is like, we've all seen AI hallucinations. You go ask ChatGPT a basic prompt about what you want to make for dinner tonight. Like 99% of it's going to be great. 1 or 2%, you're going to be like, where did it get that from? Like, I never said I have radishes in my fridge. Why are you telling me that I should put radishes in this dish or whatever it may be, right? The same thing is going to happen, automated input by AI from CRM. And also, I don't want my salespeople being robots. We're going to differentiate by being super efficient with technology, but then being superhuman when you're talking with people, right? And by superhuman, I don't mean like robot version of superhuman. I mean like extremely like EQ, forward thinking, shaking a hand, being a real person, not reading off a script, right? And so this is where I want them thinking about what is the probability of this deal? Should this move to the next stage? What are my core blockers? I don't want AI determining what the core blockers are. And my seller doesn't even think about what the blockers are because they know it's already updated in the CRM and they'll look at it tomorrow when they do their pipeline review. Like you didn't think about that and you aren't now coming up with the best strategy to do it because what are you going to do? You're going to ask the agent, okay, with those blockers, what should I do? And at some point, you're getting so removed from reality that I don't even know if you're selling. Like I'll just have the agent sell everything if this is going to be your motion, right? And so it can make you very efficient. But the human layer is really where I see the differentiation that's going to continue to occur. And we talked about this last time we spoke. I do see a swing back to, especially in the enterprise space, people wanting to get in person, shake hands, and close deals face to face. The conference track over the last couple of years has started picking up a lot. Like I've really felt energy at conferences in a very different way. I think that that's people are like, all right, I want kind of that human engagement again. We've kind of swung a little too far to like not talking to each other. So that's how I to get it all the way back to your CRM fidelity, I don't see CRM going away. Will it look different? Will certain parts be automated? Yes. Will you run into massive data cleanliness issues if you automate everything? Yes. And will you lose sellers that are actually like thinking strategically and logically if they aren't having to update things in the CRM at a deal and an account and a contact level? Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, and it just, listen, at the end of the day, it still is, you always have to have that human in the loop, and you have to think through the problems and the issues, right? In a way that you understand, right? So that you're not just, if you're in a meeting live face to face, you can't be like, oh, wait a minute, I've got to look at my AI and as to what it's telling me to say based on what you just said. You still got to have that. And that gets back to that balance we talked about at the beginning between sellers of EQ and tech, in understanding what the hallucination is and what I should be saying, because I know my product well enough, right, to be able to overcome that. But how do I use it in an operational way that makes me more efficient and effective without dumbing it down for me and not having me think?
So, and I think that it raises like that's like the core aspect of where I think I've said to a number of people, like, I'm really glad I didn't have AI in college, right? Like, why? Because like I'm glad that I had to do all this stuff, that now I'm like, oh wow, I can be more efficient with that, but I do know how to do it. I still know how to write an effective email.
Mhm.
I still know how to follow up with someone if they're ghosting me. I still know how to put a proposal
Yep.
together from scratch if I need to. I know how to like write a
Mhm.
change order or build a statement of work. Like these are all things I do know how to do. And I really hope I don't forget how to do them. Right. And so like if you had been around with AI at your disposal as a seller your entire career, like what happens if Anthropic gets turned off for the day? Like, could you just not function? Right? Like that's
Right.
kind of a scary
Exactly. Can you not function at all? Well, we talked about that a little bit last time too, because I think Claude had just been down, like I think it was like 2 weeks ago or a week ago. Is that
we talked.
if
Yeah.
so if there's issues with the LLMs and that's who you're relying on and that's what you've built off of, and something goes wrong or something goes down, you're in a heap of trouble, right? And I think that that's where, not using it is one thing, but building off of it is something different. And you've got to be able to always have that backup, right, to make sure that you've got the technology written in a way that you're not left hanging if you're just only using an LLM that suddenly goes down. But and so one last question. So we talked a little bit about this earlier. Over the next few years, like, what do you expect RevOps and MarTech orgs to look like in terms of role, skills, and structure as it relates to revenue? And I think you touched on a little bit, is making sure that there's more of the strategic conversations they're having, because at an operational level, things are being executed. Is there anything else that you want to add to that in terms of where you really see RevOps and MarTech, marketing ops,
So, one thing in particular, like RevOps, marketing tech, etc. Historically, and I'm sure that different orgs, this has all been looked at differently, but I found it to be, hey, here's a bunch of data. We've categorized it in a bunch of different ways. Now go figure out what you're going to do with this information at hand, right? Like, that's not enough. That's not far enough for these orgs to go anymore. They need to have the data, then have the insight, then have the recommendation, right? So, like, they're going to need to get much further down the track of like, yeah, I get that you can categorize this data really quickly. That probably took you, that was the thing that was really fast, which used to take a lot of time, like the analyzing the data, pivoting on it, figuring out what's happening by geo or vertical or company size, and like what's all the insight. That's the easy part now. The hard part is turning it into actionable insights and then like driving a strategy behind it, right? And that's not saying RevOps or the marketing ops team or marketing technology teams are going to be solely responsible for it. But I think you're going to see a lot of people are not. If my RevOps team comes to me with a bunch of data and goes, just figure out what to do with this for me, 5 years ago, I would have been like, thank you so much. This was awesome. I'm going to go try to figure it out. Now I'm going to be like, what's the insight? What's the action? Like, tell me more, because I need I'm expecting that of you, right? So I do think that it's becoming more and more of a critical function. And I think more and more is expected of them. I think at the startup space, you're going to see, I don't want to call them generalists, but you're going to see more expected out of people. So you talked about an AE earlier that needs to be able to do all the tech and have the EQ. I see that in the RevOps space too, where like in the startup world, you might have your first sales hire might be expected to do rev ops, marketing ops, be an AE, be a BDR, and like drive the top line strategy too, right? Like that's probably going to be an expectation for early stage startups, right? So that's where I see it going. I see it becoming more and more prevalent and valuable to organizations, but I see the insight needing to be expected to be much, much higher from those orgs.
Yeah. So just raising the bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Just everyone's bar is getting raised because everyone knows what you have access
to. Exactly.
Another one, right?
Yeah, and across the board, you really have to level up your game, no matter which role you are, as it relates to the organization from a revenue perspective. If you're supporting it, you've got to be able to also level up your skills and experience because expectations across the board are higher.
Yeah, you could have asked the question about what's going to happen with anything in the business world, and I would have been like, the bar's raised. You're going to have to do more.
Exactly. Well, listen, I think that's a great place to stop and end. But Robbie, thanks so much for joining us today, and look forward to continuing the conversation at another time.
Absolutely, I appreciate you having me on, Marty.